Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, even the new Sword and Shield stuff, it's all in stock over at the Pokétown store. Go ahead and check them out, and you can also use the code OmniPoke for an extra 5% discount on your orders. For today's video, we are looking at the ADP build of Zacian V. I've already done a build on the Lucario and Melmetal defensive list. Now we're looking at a more aggressive one, and personally, this is the list that I think is possibly the strongest deck in the format. I think it seems really strong to me from my early playtesting. I always liked playing ADP Keldeo. I was kind of frustrated by the damage cap that it had and how defensive it had to play. This time we're seeing ADP in a completely different light. This is an aggressive deck in terms of prize racing for sure. You don't really do anything to your opponent on the first two turns. You just go ahead and use your GX attack, but then instantly you're basically putting the opponent on a 2-turn clock to win, and it's quite often that will be how the game pans out. The game can go 4 or 5 turns a lot of the time with ADP Zacian. It can really feel that strong when you are up against opposing 2 and 3 prize decks. So yeah, I think it's super solid. Let's look at the basic concept. And it's pretty obvious that Zacian V is going to be a great card for ADP. They really go hand in hand for one another. Obviously, there's Metal Energy attack cost for Zacian, which also goes with ADP, which means we only need a couple of Guzma&Hala special energy cards so that we can actually use that Altered Creation GX, which is very simple to pull off. And at the same time, you always, going first or second, basically pass your turn as ADP, because you're just attaching to ADP and passing, and then it's your second turn when you start attacking, which means every single game you will have the chance to Intrepid Sword at least once to give yourself an extra +3 cards for free off of that Zacian, and sometimes it's additional attachments onto the bench as well. So just making ADP more consistent than it previously was, whilst also having a better attacking presence in the deck, because the damage buff that ADP gives Zacian is pretty dangerous. You go up to 260, which means we're just 1 damage counter off of a lot of important tag team Pokemon in the format, and even against ADP, if you're playing Shrine and Vital Band, which we are, we can actually cheese our way to 280. Yes, you don't get to take the additional prize, but it doesn't actually matter when you're up against ADP, because they already give up 3 prize cards, and then you can just take 3 prizes against like their Zacian later on, or like a Dedenne or something. So yeah, 280 is actually a possibility in 1 turn of this guy, so it seems really powerful. Let's look at the Pokemon first. It's going to be a Jirachi-based build. I think it's pretty obvious when you need to pivot in and out of your Zacian with that Brave Blade attack. You do 230, but during your next turn, this Pokemon can't attack. So it's pretty clear that you want to have Jirachi here, so you can just use 1 switch or 1 Mallow&Lana, go into your Stellar Wish, get a bit of extra value, and then go straight back into your Zacian if need be, which is pretty sweet. So Zacian, decent lead for the deck always, and is a great pivot in between our Brave Blades. And just while we're passing, you'd rather pass with a 1 prize Pokemon in the active than having your Zacian or ADPs in the line of fire, of course. You then have 2 copies of ADP, obviously mainly here for that Altered Creation GX. What I love about this archetype now is that you have the luxury of just sacrificing your ADP. You just GX attack, knowing that it can easily just get knocked out, because you have the backup now of Metal Saucer and Intrepid Sword. That means that Zacian is probably still going to be swinging on the following turn, even if ADP gets knocked out. So we're far less reliant on Ultimate Ray than we used to be with ADP. It used to be that we were really crossing our fingers that we could hold on with the help of like a Choice Helmet or stuff like that to stop our opponent from hitting 280 to just knock us out the gate. And now we really don't mind. Sometimes ADP sticks on the board, that's great, we get to Ultimate Ray and thin the deck more and such. But if you get to Altered Creation, you're just happy with that in this format, because Zacian can just, take it from there, really, which is really insane. So it's all about that GX attack, really. And again, in some matchups, if you're up against some heavy tag team GX matchups, you can actually alter Creation for just that 1 attachment these days, and then just go even more aggressive with the Zacian. For example, against Mewtwo and Mew decks, it may actually be preferable for you to just GX immediately with 1 attachment with ADP, and then just start trying to swing with Intrepid Sword rather than get the extra value of Alter Creation. It opens up like things like Dedenne being easy ways to close the game, or even like Jirachis and stuff if you find your custom catchers. But Mewtwo and Mew normally puts down multiple tag team Pokemon to attack with, so that alter creation for one attachment isn't actually the worst in some matchups, so just something to bear in mind. We then have 4 copies of Zacian V. It will break the bank, but it'll certainly also break your deck. It is really, really, really important to have 4 copies of this card. You do not want to miss drawing 3 cards. It is a free 3 cards. Insane! And it's even more important because it can also high roll your energy cards. It's not insane to get that. Think of using Stormy Winds blind with old Rayquaza GX. Sometimes you just had to do it. And here there's no downside to the Intrepid Sword, and you just randomly at points get extra value of attachments, and that can mean 1 less Saucer needed in the mid to late game, which is actually a huge deal. So don't miss Intrepid Sword, play the maximum amount of copies you can, because that ability is so gross. Honestly, it's crazy. We then have 1 copy of Oranguru. Its ability can help you manipulate top decks. It means you can make your Marnies and Professor Magnolia, you can make those supporters a little bit better for you, where you're not having to discard or shuffle back in some pieces that you'd rather keep and draw back into. And it means, of course, you can also manipulate your Intrepid Sword, which is a really cool combo you can do. If you've got a Metal Energy in hand, you can just go ahead and put that to the top of the deck. Then at the end of your turn, you can just Intrepid Sword that instantly into play. So Oranguru has some great niches here. He can be an extra dig just in general, whilst also protecting some key cards in the deck, like Saucers and Custom Catchers in those opening turns, whilst also having that mini Intrepid Sword value. It really does seem worth playing the one of. And then we have 1 copy of Absol. It's not just us playing Jirachi, there's a whole heap of other archetypes out there also looking to have a Jirachi engine. I've said a few times that I think in this format, if you want to go first, you probably need to have either a Dedenne or a Jirachi engine, so that you don't just, suffer donks a lot of the time. So with more people going towards Jirachi engines, having your Absol, making life a little bit more awkward for them, makes a lot of sense to me. Onto the trainers now. I'm actually playing a lot of one-offs, and this is because I've got techie already, because the simplicity of this deck is just obvious. It's just like every game you GX and then you move into Zacian. That's like your simple day-to-day game plan, and then you have all these one-of techs that just help you in specific scenarios. So I'll go through all of these. Obviously, 1 Reset Stamp, I'd kind of like to play more, but space is a thing, and I'm preferring my tech cards right now. Yes, Reset Stamp is a little bit random when I'm not playing anything like Rosa that we've previously seen in ADP, or even like Bill's Analysis, which is something I've championed previously. I could certainly see one of those cards going into the list, or just having a higher Reset Stamp count in general, but I am also playing Marnie, so I feel like I can get away with 1 Reset Stamp, as usually it's a mid to late game card anyway. And you can try and protect it with a Oranguru if it is in opening hands at times, which is cool. 1 Great Catcher as well as 4 Custom Catchers. I think if there are any Doll-based decks, it's going to be important to play Custom Catcher. Also, of course, it means that if you knock out 1 tag team, you're then just Custom Catchers away on any non-GX from winning the game, thanks to your alter creation. So Custom Catchers I'm still really enjoying. You could also have a look at just playing something like Fion and Great Catchers on their own, if you're thinking there's enough Dedenne GX in the meta. Additionally, you could think about just having the coin flip Pokemon Catcher as well. I would not advise it at all. I think oftentimes 1 pair of Custom Catchers is enough to win you games with this deck. That's why I'm happy playing the 4 of, knowing that I only need to use it once. And I know a lot of people's gripes with Custom Catcher is that you find it hard to accumulate them and such. But when you already have 1 Great Catcher and you have those customs helping you out, I think it's fine. Additionally, it can be a nice defense against these hand-locking Mewtwo-based decks. You can still draw a few cards off of customs and get you back into good shape. So I actually like their multi-purpose use really a lot in this deck. Because our natural support count isn't the highest, really, compared to a lot of other decks, and we don't have Quick Ball for Dedenne as an out, so naturally having this additional mini draw off of customs is actually kind of helpful at times, which is cool. We then have 3 copies of Tag Call. It can obviously help us access that ADP, so although we play 2 copies, we have, 9 outs to find the guy turn 1, so that's pretty simple. We've got the 4 Quick Ball, the 3 Tag Call, the 2 physical ADPs, so it's very often that you'll find this guy on your first turn, even when you're going first, so you can start attaching to him, which is of course the priority. And obviously we're also playing some great tag team supporters in the deck that can make these one-of tools and stadiums look a lot more viable, because we can search them out at the right times with our Guzma&Hala package that we play. So you're seeing all these random one-ofs, but you have good searchability for them, so I feel kind of okay with it. We then have the important 4-ofs, Quick Ball being great search and discard synergy for the Metal Saucer that's just to the left of the card. That has that great energy acceleration for metal types. Zacian really does appreciate this. It means you can chain Zacians at times. Even if Zacians are getting one-shot, you can try and make combos happen of turn attachment and double saucer, which can really just be insane tempo-wise, which is great. And it just means that you're never really out of the game, even if things like Ultimate Ray, or even if you've not been able to Ultimate Ray, for example. So that's really cool. And then we play 4 copies of Switch, as well as 1 escape board. Obviously, we do play Jirachi in here, but also it's a big deal to get out of the way when you're Brave Blading, to get your Zacian out of the way. So that's why I'm prioritizing a 4 count of Switch and just having 1 escape board. Obviously, we have Guzma&Hala to try and get that board, which is helpful, but at the same time, there's a lot of Absol around anyway, so I feel like maximizing the Switch count makes a lot of sense to me. For stadiums, we have Viridian Forest. This is a Guzma&Hala-able way of getting 2 energies into the hand, because you can get your special energy card, and then the Viridian can get you your metal for the following turn. So it's a really big deal. It basically guarantees your ADP off of 1 Guzma&Hala. You can go ahead and get a skateboard to move like Jirachi or Absol or something out the way, and then you can also go ahead and get the Forest and the special energy card. So 1 tag call basically guarantees a turn 2 ADP attack. Sometimes you need a switch in the mix there or something like that, but usually it's like an ADP on its own, basically off of 1 tag call. So it really is insane when you have that ADP and Guzma&Hala synergy going on, which is pretty sweet. So I like Viridian for that reason. It also has minor discard synergy with just metals. You can just go ahead and pitch a metal, grab another metal, just like you would in Malamar, just because it makes your metal sources alive quicker in the game, whilst also thinning the deck. So I think that's a nice option to have. Lysandre Labs is a lot more specific. It's very nice against the Pikachu and Zekrom matchup, because oftentimes they are running Giant Charm, or whatever it's translated to in English. It might be Big Amulet, I'm not sure. But they try to stay out of range with their Pikarom. So having the Labs in play means that your buff of 260 damage then is reduced by the 20 for resistance, and you still get through a Pikarom, which is really, really important. Additionally, it's good against Luke Metal builds of Zacian V, or even sometimes mirror matches where they can play, again, Giant Charms or Frying Pans, and you can try and get rid of those at the same time, which is really awesome. So yeah, Lysandre Labs is really good for that. There's also a handful of other decks out there that will be using Giant Charm as well. I know some Mewtwo builds can sometimes play it, so I think Lysandre Labs is good for that purpose. We also play 1 copy of Shrine of Punishment. Shrine of Punishment is very good against 270 hit points tag teams, or just regular, tag teams is the only thing, really. And it's good against ADP as well. I said how you can Vital Band plus Shrine. Again, that's off of a Guzma&Hala. You can get 20 damage off of Guzma&Hala, which is really sweet, to then put them into a knockout range, which is awesome, of course. And the 260 that we do with Zacian just needs that 1 damage counter to push over the line on things like Mewtwo. So yeah, obviously that's another really helpful stadium to have, especially because it's just so searchable in this deck, even as a 1 count. For tools, Vital Band I'm absolutely loving. I'm really trying to get a second copy in. There's actually a handful of cards that I want a second copy in this deck. I've really been tempted to cut custom catchers, so then you just like play a Fion, another great catcher, and then I have my spaces that I want for like a second Stamp, a second Vital Band, a third Marnie. These sorts of cards are things that I'm really hoping to do, but I'm really making the statement that custom catchers are worth it for sure. So you may see some ugly one-offs. If you want to make the spaces, you can cut customs if you really need to, but from my testing, customs have been busted. So yeah, that's why we have a bunch of ugly one-offs. But Vital Band is really, really nice to search out for that extra 10 damage again. Getting you to 270 is pretty sweet. Just simple as that, really. Vital Band's great for that reason. We then have 1 Metal Frying Pan of our own. I am a little bit concerned about fire decks. You could think about playing a Giant Charm instead of the Metal Frying Pan. I like the reduction, and I like that protection against the fire decks out there right now. Don't make life too easy for Baby Blounds. Don't make life too easy for Abilities Are to just come in with a 1-prizer and just bop you. So I think the Frying Pan at the moment I'm preferring to Giant Charm. The reason why Giant Charm you may think is stronger is it protects you against Mewtwo a little bit more, because you can have your ADP at 310 hit points, which stays out of range of a full blitz, which is really important. And even against Ability Zard, even though they can hit 300, you're now giving yourself plus hit points rather than reduction of damage, which is what Choice Helmet used to do. So the Giant Charm, I think, could be interchangeable with the Frying Pan, But right now, I'm just aware of the amount of fire decks that are probably coming into the format just because they want to beat these new Zacian lists. So that's why we got the pan going on. And then we got the board, of course, mainly for the Jirachi in here. For the supporters, we have the Tag Call package, so I'm playing one copy of Mallow&Lana. This is another card that I'd like to play a second copy of, to be honest. It is such a good card, but normally, like I said, you use your GX attack, and the game doesn't last many more turns after that. It's like, it lasts 3 turns if you've drawn poorly after your GX attack, basically. So, yeah, I feel like one Mallow&Lana you can get away with, especially when you can Sinlin the card back. Sinlin, of course, having that minor discard synergy of getting rid of metal energies whilst also getting back some nice supporters. That's kind of why I'm happy enough playing one Mallow&Lana and only 2 Marnies, because I know Sinlin is always an option in the deck to fish these things out of the discard pile once I've used them once. 2 copies of Guzma&Hala because he is that important. I've hated prizing him. It just means that you don't get the ADP attack off. So I bumped up to 2 copies. Also, it makes me a lot happier to play the 3-1 of stadiums and the 3-1 of tools, because it means that that second Guzma&Hala still can get value. Even if you're just using it for that just stadium effect without any discard, it can still, again, be great value to you. So I like the 2 copies, to be honest. I think it is like important enough to play 2 just for prizing reasons, but it's meant that I've lent even more into that sort of engine with all my tech 1-ofs, basically. 2 Marnies for hand disruption on the opponent's end. You could think of just playing a 3rd copy over the 1 reset stamp if you think that 1 stamp is a little bit random. But at the moment, I'm just at the 2 count. And then we have the 4 Professor's Research to just dump and draw. The card is silly, and we have Oranguru in the deck to try and protect some key pieces when need be. For energies, I'm playing 1 copy of Aurora Energy as well as 1 copy of Unit Energy. I like having 2 physical copies. So again, prizing is less of an issue when you're trying to use this Guzma&Hala package. But the reason why I'm playing a split is that ultimately, if Unit Energy is in the deck, you want to use that one for your ADP. But the Aurora Energy is also usable on Zacian, of course. The main reason I'm not having just straight up 2 Aurora Energies, though, is because you're already using Guzma&Hala to discard 2 cards. That 3rd discard can sometimes start getting a little bit painful. So I like having the option of 1 unit in here. You could also think about this Aurora Energy being a rainbow, but it can be a little bit awkward for some damage breakpoints. You take yourself down to 270 on your ADP, which is annoying in like mirror match situations and such. So I'm still preferring the Aurora. I'm just not wanting 2 physical copies in here because I'm aware of the Guzma&Hala discards that we can sometimes suffer from. So that's why we're just having a 1-1 split and then 10 metal energies. I've kind of floated between 11 and 10 as well. Again, I've tried to squeeze as much space in the deck as possible to have 4 of the important cards and then enough 1-of text to beat certain matchups. So right now I'm at 10. I could actually see it going up 1 more just to have more odds of Intrepid Swording for energies and more opening energy cards in your hand. So that you can start discarding some, as well as always having guaranteed attachments, even though you're not using your supporter for turn going first. So yeah, at the moment I'm at 12, but I can actually see this going higher if you want to make your Intrepid Sword more live. The full list then, always in the description below, but there it is for you guys as well right now. For tech options, I've really been exploring a lot, although I've stuck relatively close to my starting off list. There's a lot of things I'm aware of for sure. There's a lot of lists out there that have done well already in Japan. It was one of the more popular archetypes in the day 2 of the Aichi tournament, the large tournament of over 1,400 players. And yeah, there's a lot of variation going on in their builds as well. So there's a lot to discuss really. One of the big omissions from my list is no Dedenne GX. Dedenne, of course, gives you a great out off of Quick Ball. If your hand is completely useless, you can at least Dedenne change away and stay in the game. I think I never played Dedenne GX in any of my ADP Keldeo lists, and although we are more aggressive than those lists and try and close the game quicker, I still want to maintain that I don't want to have Dedenne on the board as a liability option. I think it's too easy for mirror matches and such to punish that just by having great catcher available, at least force them to find custom catcher combos. So right now I'm respecting things like mirror matches too much, and also I don't have Mew in the list, so I'm a little bit afraid of Pikarom from being able to take those easy 2 prizes for free as well. So right now, I think it's a little bit detrimental because in my eyes, it takes up more than 1 space because you also want to have a Mew in your deck. But that's also something that you could consider. Of course, the card is crazy good just for drawing you when you don't have any other option in your hand. There's a few other tech Pokemon I've certainly thought of. Like I said, if you want to cut away from customs and just increase your Great Catcher count to 2, buy yourself 2 spaces in the list because you cut the 4 customs, 1 becomes a Great Catcher, 1 becomes a Fione, and then you have 2 slots to play around with. So that's certainly a temptation. I'm sure some people will go down that route. Right now, I'm still just backing myself with custom catchers. Mew for Pikarom in general, even if you're not playing Dedenne, can be helpful, so they can't just set up an easy Zacian knockout for future turns, or just take an easy single prize knockout with their sniping attack, and then they just need to knock out 1 Zacian after they've knocked out ADP. That's also something that you might be a little bit concerned about. Galarian Berserker, if you're not too happy with the cheeky 1 damage things that we have in the Shrine and the Vital Band, you may want to add in the Galarian Berserker for extra damage buff to push yourself to 280 raw damage with Zacian post GX attack, which is nuts, of course. And there's also the option of Mimikyu for shadowboxing things, slowing down Mewtwo and such. You could think about this alongside Power Plant. If you want to play Shrine just for more general matchups, you could play the Mimikyu over Power Plants. But Power Plant is also an option, as is Big Amulet. I've mentioned these cards a couple of times, but I've mentioned the Big Amulet already in the tools section. That it's certainly an option for the ADP getting a bit of health buff, which is always cool. There are even more Pokemon you could consider. I would only consider the Krogonal and the Keldeo GX if I was going down a higher basic energy route with energy spinners. There was actually a couple of Japanese lists that were playing a couple, or I think even as high as 3 spinner in their lists, and were having 2 or 3 basic waters and just basic metals, and having no Guzma&Hala at all. Now, I think it's insane, because Guzma&Hala is a crazy, crazy good card for this deck in general. But Spinner does have some great value. It gets you 2 energy attachments to guarantee ADP, similar to how Guzma&Hala can in this list with the Viridian. But at the same time, it gets you extra energies out of the deck just to start pitching them with Metal Saucer. So if you go second and get that spinner value, it can be insane. If you go first with a spinner, they're actually pretty bad because you'd rather have physical energies in your deck to improve your Intrepid Sword. So I'm against spinner mainly because I would always opt to go first with this deck. So it's probably less than 50% of the time you'll be going second and getting spinner value because there'll be some opponents who win the coin flip and still choose to go second. So, yeah, it's less than 50% time a great card in your deck compared to just more basic energies. And I also think Guzma&Hala is just crazy good anyway. So, yeah. And then the final thing I could think about is Crushing Hammer and Faber. Faber's another good card, similar to why I'm playing Lysandre Labs. It can shut down some stadiums like Swell. It can shut down some tools like Choice Helmets and such. Not Choice Helmets, what am I talking about? Frying Pans. So it's a versatile supporter that I could certainly see coming into the list. It can even punish opposing ADP lists that rely on Guzma&Hala themselves. If you can punish them on those opening couple of turns just by, Stellar Wishing into a Faber or something, that could also be really, really painful for the opponent. And Crushing Hammers in general, again, good for mirror matches to deny your opponent using their Ultra Creation GX. If you just, again, Stellar Wish into it on those opening turns or whatever, that could be really insane. And just in general matchups, you're removing an energy attachment from someone and hurting their tempo a lot of the time. It's a coin flip card, so it's something that I don't think is that worth it in the list right now. But if ADP Zacian becomes literally the top deck in the format, having some good mirror techs is never a bad idea. Onto the matchup overview then. I've been so impressed with this deck that I could only really muster 3 bad matchups on this slide. I honestly think this archetype has the tools to beat almost everything in the format. I think that's just the nature of Ultra Creation GX. You beat random stuff just because you can argue a way around every matchup being winnable for you just because you Ultra Creation and you can put your opponent on a 2 or 3 turn clock at most. Even against non-GX decks, you put them on a 3 turn clock after an Ultra Creation, right? So, it should not be out of reach for many decks at all. I think against Florges and Morpeko and even Sablegoons, if you are playing the custom catchers, you have a decent chance of beating them just because you can make your gusts count and just knock out those things for additional prize cards, which is great. Again, if you want to have a slightly better time against those, you could add in the Fione. It depends how important you think those matchups are to beat. Right now, I'm thinking they're reasonable decks, but not outright the most important decks to tech for. So really all I've got is Baby Blounds. Baby Blounds being a threat, of course. I am playing one Frying Pan, but usually you probably use Alter Creation, then instantly get knocked out by that point. Then you've got one tanky Zacian that forces 5 energies out of them, which even that's not a lot, to be honest. And then they can just burst GX for game a lot of the time. So they only need to knock out one ADP and one Zacian. That shouldn't be too difficult for them. And, you know, they have, like, Lucky Egg and stuff. Yes, we play Labs, so maybe that could also come into effect against some of these Blound decks. But I think that inherently could be a little bit rough for you. So, yeah, I think those are the main awkward matchups. And then Zacian Luke Metal, because they do have those energy destruction cards always in their list. And they have a lot of tanking with their Frying Pans. Normally they're playing 3 Frying Pan, which, again, can be pretty awkward at times. Once they've used their Luke Metal GX attack and they have Frying Pans, they're effectively 280. And, of course, we can't use Shrine to put them down. And our max hit is 270 with a Vital Band. So you need the help of Labs and stuff to slow them down. So, yeah, that's just something to bear in mind. For my closing thoughts, I just think Zacian's a crazy card. If you haven't noticed by now, I've been gushing about it the entire video. I've been gushing about the combo of ADP and Zacian this entire video. I'm fully convinced by it. Like, just full clarity, it's probably the archetype I'm going to be playing this entire format until we get the next Sword and Shield set coming out, to be honest. I can't really look past it. I think it's just simple and effective. You've got enough leeway to play like one-of techs for matchups that you're scared of, so if things start becoming more and less relevant, you can trim away some of these one-ofs that I'm starting to play for other things. So yeah, I just think this is a really simple... I mean, it's not the most simple base I could give you because I have got a lot of one-off techs, but I think they're all valid techs going into the start of the format at the very least. Let me know if you agree with me for the tech cards that I have and if you feel like it's worth teching for other matchups, but... yeah, I think ZacianADP is just a front-runner archetype and is possibly just like the simplest strong deck in the format to play for most people because its game plan is always just like attach an energy GX, turn 3, like get Zacian, like that's it, you know? You have like mini goals and stuff going on throughout the entire game, but you just force the game plan on your opponent every single game. Like it's always just a good game plan to have, so yeah, just seems really crazy to me. I do think there are other ways of building this archetype. I think you could go more aggressive with energy switches. In those sorts of archetypes, you probably want to have the Dene GX in the list, and you probably also want to have a 4th Jirachi, so that you can get discard synergy for your metal energies, then find a Saucer, then find an E-switch. It's kind of combo-based, but it does mean you get to GX attack turn 1 going second, which is just absolutely crazy. Now, the main reason why I'm kind of against this is because we've seen... aggressive builds of ADP previously kind of flop. When ADP first came out, we saw End's Resolve, which is obviously a lot worse than using just like Saucer E-Switch stuff. But we did also see some Rayquaza E-Switch decks at the Latin American International Championships, and they kind of fell away in favor of more defensive builds. So I'm not a big fan of that, and I've already made the stance that I don't want to ever have the Denes on my board with this sort of deck. Because at the very least you are slow tempo-wise, because you're not really affecting your opponent's board on those opening turns, so they can easily punish those Denes later on. And oftentimes people can knock out like a Jirachi, so you don't want to let them knock out a Jirachi, then ADP, then just have easy knockout on a Dedenne. You at least want to make them go for a Zacian. So yeah, that's why I'm not playing Dedenne, but it's something you could try, just because faster GX attack is never a bad thing. And I also think you could go even more defensive than I am. Right now, I'm quite aggressive damage-wise. I've got the Shrine, I've got the Vital Band, and I am trying to be quite aggressive a lot of the time with this list. But you could certainly think of just cutting away from Jirachi and cutting away from the Absol and Oranguru, and then you're just basically becoming like a Greens build of Luke Metal, where they would just play... the big 3-prizer stuff, but instead of the Greens engine, you're just using Zacian's ability in those opening turns like you normally would. But essentially the big payoff there is that you just have so much meat for your opponent to get through. They can't have easy cop-out knockouts on these 1-prizers in the early turns or as custom catcher late game win conditions. You just say, here's a big 3-prizer and then 2 big 2-prizers after them. And if you can have additional stamps in the list at that point as well, you can really be punishing people. Putting your opponent down to 1 and then just having a Zacian bearing down on them seems really, really scary. So let me know what you think. What's going to come out on top? Do you like the mix and match build that I've gone for? Or do you think an aggressive list will come out on top? Or a more defensive list that has 0 single prize attackers, well, single prize Pokemon on the list, will also be a threat in the format. I'll hear your discussion down below. Do you prefer this to the Luke Metal build? Do you think it's going to be the top contender? Are there any matchups that I should be more afraid of when I'm playing this archetype? Let me know what you think of the list. Let me know what you think of Custom Catcher as well in the list. Am I just being too greedy and cutting away for some important 2 counts right now? Or am I just making the stance that Custom Catcher is so good and you agree with me? Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in another video tomorrow.